Do you have a big change in life that maybe you've been putting off? Or maybe, life just handed you one of those pleasant little surprises or gigantic surprises? Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to make a big change. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Danny, let me ask you, do you prefer making big changes yourself or having life hand you big changes?
Huh. That's a good question. I think it's like both. I don't think you have a choice. I think sometimes usually I think, at least in my experience, when a big change happens, it's like 60-40. Like life is hitting me in the face,
Mhm.
telling me that a change is necessary until I finally realize it, and then I realize I need to make a big change.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you don't listen to it long enough, eventually life will just be like, okay, it's time for a change. Whap, and there you go.
Yeah. But the funny thing is like I think we're so resistant to it, but at the same time, like it's also like when we can see the best, like with the most like quality changes in our lives that are the best for us too, from those moments.
hmm I
Yeah,
just read this book called Lessons in Chemistry, and it said that change is in our chemistry. Go figure.
really.
Yeah.
I mean, changes everywhere.
Yeah. And courage is the base of all change. So, anyways, that being
There we go.
said, we're going to share a few quick tips for how to make a big change in your life or how to deal with a big change if one just got handed to you. So, I will
Yeah.
go first. My first one for how to make a big change is don't make it a big change. Just small little changes. So like there's the analogy of like if you're flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, or let's say from the West Coast to the East Coast, and you change the trajectory of the plane just a fraction, 1 degree. All of a sudden, instead of going from LA to New York, you're going from LA down to Florida. So like small
Yeah.
little changes compounded over time make a huge difference. But I think one of the big problems that people make with a big change is they think, oh, this is like, I need to do this big thing. I need to everything. Oh, huge. And it's unsustainable. So one thing that I like is from the book The Compound Effect, where he talks about just doing something so small that you can't fail, but something that's
Yeah.
sustainable for life. So what small steps in that direction can you sustain for life? And this is something that I've found in my own life because like things like going to the gym and lifting weights. When I used to try and like do it like yeah and go 3-4 times a week, that would last for 2 months and then I quit. But I found out I can go 2 times a week and I can sustain that forever. So that's what I do.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it because you're right. Like that's what I think every time people face a big change and fail, I think a lot of times, and this is like personal experience, what we're focusing on that big end and realizing it instead of looking at it like a set of baby steps that are manageable that we can get to, like, well, it's like they always said, right? Like a journey of 10,000 miles begins with one step, right? You can get
Mhm.
there just by taking one step at a time. You don't have to make 10,000. You can't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So you do it one at a time. And I like that because it's like the right way to think about these changes is everything will get done if you do it in incremental steps rather than looking at the whole thing and trying to accomplish it at once because you can't.
Yeah, I think the problem is they call them baby steps, and everybody's like, "I'm not a baby." When they should
Yeah.
call them like smart steps, because anytime something's labeled smart, like smartphone, smart car, smart this, smart
People love
TV,
it.
people love it because they feel retarded, and they're like, "Hey, if it says smart, then I must be smart." So I'm gonna do some smart steps.
I'm a smart person. Yeah. There you go. They should. It is all labeling. It does help. My first one for how to make a big change or whatever, or face it, is face your fears and identify them. I think this is super helpful because like a lot of times we focus on like the change we're trying to make rather than like what terrifies us about the change. And those things that we fear are probably going to be huge hurdles that either prevent us from making it, totally cause us to get off track, or cause us to hide back in whatever original thing we had going on that wasn't really working for us. So like, and I've experienced this in my own life, like if you don't face your own fears and know what they are and identify them, and once you identify them, it's much easier to just overcome them. And just know, like, okay, I feel this way, that's okay. I can still do this. It's just fear, or it's just I'm just scared of X, Y, or Z. And I can actually get through that now because I know what I'm actually facing rather than just some like, imagined monster in the background that's gonna like destroy me if I go that way.
hmm Yeah, isn't it interesting how like if you don't face a fear, it'll just get bigger and bigger and just like be more constricting around your life, and you just And then like once you face it, maybe not immediately, but then it kind of disappears and you can look back and you can be like, did I was really scared of that? Like
Yeah.
it's almost
Dude,
it doesn't make sense.
dude, I've had that experience with like student loans. Oh my God, when I first, it felt like this, like it felt like somebody was pushing down on me with like a million pounds of weight. And then once you deal with it, it's like, oh, and like deal with it in the sense of like just take care of the basic, like I wasn't like deal with it like I didn't pay it off all at once or anything, but like you just feel so much better once you address the issue. And it's so
Mhm.
funny, but that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just need to name the fear and go after it. Uh,
Yeah.
so my next one for how to make a big change is this is kind of like once you decided the direction you want to go, burn the boats. Like you heard there's that
Nice.
old story about whatever, I don't know if it was the Romans or the Trojans or some myth where
Somebody did somebody.
they went to war and just to make sure that the guys fought extra hard, he burned the boats. Can't turn back. So they either need to win or die. And I think that's an important concept because a lot of people dip their toes in stuff. They're like, yeah, I want to be this and I want to be that. And they just kind of dip their toe in. And they're like, oh, I tried for a week. It didn't work. I knew it
Yeah.
wasn't going to work. I tried a week. It didn't work. And so, but like when you actually make a decision that like this is what it's going to be, and I'm just going to do it until, because anything worth being good at is worth being bad at until you can get good at it. So like once you just make up your mind that I'm going to do this until, you just burn the boats, make sure you can't turn around, and then just keep going or die.
Yeah. 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 Or perish because you can't get back anymore. Yeah. It's funny that is true though, because I noticed like, I remember, when I was struggling with switching careers, like I was like, there was part of me that was like, I've been doing this for so long. Maybe I could keep doing what I'm doing, sort of like keep continuing the one direction, but also do something else. And it's like really not sustainable and you're not making a commitment. So like it wasn't until I finally like just like was like, you know what, I quit the graduate program that I was in and then just stopped bothering with any more like nonsense at work and just focus on other things that it really got better because you commit yourself to a different angle totally. Instead of trying to be half or like whatever, like dipping your toe in and just never getting there. It's true. And we do that because I think we're afraid of that's another fear, right? You're afraid of that change and leaving what you know is normal,
What
even though
happens if
normal's not
if
working
none
out.
of it works? Well, then you
Yeah.
just figure it out. I mean, I face that on a daily basis where like I just I worry. I have a bad habit of worrying. And like I worry, what if it all falls apart? And
Yeah.
it's already fallen apart multiple times in my life and somehow I've kept going. So like
Yeah.
the answer is if it falls all apart, well then I just keep going until I figure it out. But like there's the constant worrying of just like, well, what happens if it and it's just a bad habit.
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's hard too, I think, because like especially if you're doing something like on your own, like rather than like within an organization, like it's scary because like it feels like it could fall apart at any moment because you're the only thing holding it up, right? It makes it very hard too. That's the other side of it. Yeah, that's a good one. My second one actually I think goes pretty well is practice self-compassion too. Like know that, you're making a big change. It's going to be scary. It's going to be hard. It's going to be frustrating. You're going to have to probably, commit to things more than you would normally. And you're going to have to change your life a lot. And so it's okay. You're going to have bad days. Things are going to be difficult. You might need to just take a break sometime. You might need to give yourself some time off, but be kind of aware of how you're feeling and adjust accordingly. Don't be lazy, kind of, make sure you have a plan, but like don't burn yourself out too short because that's a sure sign or that's a sign of failure. You're going to not make it if you do that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like being kind to yourself is really important because oftentimes we treat ourselves a lot worse than we would ever treat a friend. Like generally, I treat myself
Totally.
on par with how I treat enemies. And
Yeah,
you know, and so like
it's
being kind
terrible.
with yourself is a practice that's helpful in these times because when you're going through a big change, it's going to be rough.
Yeah,
And that is a great segue, Danny. Thank you. Uh,
no problem.
Prepare for obstacles. So I think this is something that trips so many people up because they have all these good intentions and they've told everyone on social media and they've got this whole rah rah crowd. And then all of a sudden, obstacle crops up. Like, let's say they're going on a diet and all of a sudden they're really hungry one day and they fall off the wagon. Or let's say they're breaking
Right.
up with someone that they've been in a toxic relationship with and then all of a sudden they're really lonely and they didn't delete their number from their phone yet. So like they want all these things. if you can prepare yourself for these obstacles beforehand, knowing there's going to be times when you're weak, when you're feeling down, when any type of obstacle that can come up. And nowadays with like AI, you can just ask ChatGPT, like, what type of obstacles will I encounter when I'm doing this? And it'll just come up with a whole bunch of suggestions for you. And that way, you know what you're going to face. And for each one of those obstacles, you can have a few ideas for how to handle them. So now, when you're on that diet and you fall off the bandwagon, you can be like, oh, you know what? This happens a lot. Tomorrow I'm back on it. Okay. Don't make it 2 days in a row. Or like if you're in that relationship and you dial an ex, just be like, oops, that was a mistake. Let me call somebody who's actually good for me, a friend, a family member, talk with them, and then delete the ex's number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one too, though, because that is like a very self-compassionate method too, because it's also like stuff is going to happen. Like you're gonna have, I mean, I think this is our biggest mistake we make, like when we make changes, is we get excited and we think we're gonna do it perfectly. It's gonna be like a straight line from A to Z,
I'm
right?
gonna
Like with
nail
no
this.
issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And we get excited, especially when it's new, because I think like, you feel like you're making a lot of progress, things are going really well, but then something's always gonna come up. There's always gonna be, you don't know, you might respond bad to something one day or have a bad emotional day or whatever, and then things get just totally derailed. And if you don't like address it and be easy on yourself, it's going to make the whole effort a failure. And instead, it could just be one bad day or one bad afternoon or one mistake. Who cares? Move
Mm-hmm.
on. Those are
Yeah.
just part of any process. Yeah.
Bingo.
I like that one. That's a good one. My last one for how to make a big change is just get some routine set. Doesn't have to be a lot. It can be a little, just something to kind of structure your day. We talk about this a lot. I think it's very helpful. Anything like, bookending the day with like a couple routines like journaling, reading, meditation, any kind of like yoga or something, anything that's like kind of good for you can help you kind of keep some sort of regimented schedule. Because I think that's really helpful because a lot of times we make a big change, we don't know exactly what to expect. And it can be really hard to keep a schedule going because it's just, there's a lot of unknowns. So having something to kind of structure your day can help you kind of start the day and end the day, at least in a way that's like normal and consistent.
Yeah, and there's definitely those people who are like, but I'm more spontaneous. Like I can't plan the day, and it's like, granted, some people are more spontaneous, but one of the benefits of having positive regular routines in your life is they help combat the mad, wild swings that occur in life. Because you're going to have your ups and downs in life, but when you have a positive routine, you can say, well, today was probably the worst day in my life, but hey, at least I still did this stuff that's good for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it helps. It makes it so much better too. Or at least you know how, like, I know the day is going to start this way. And I might not know what's going to happen after, but I know it's going to start this way. I know it's going to end this way, and I'm good,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bingo. So there you have it, how to make a big change in your life, because like it or not, whether you choose or not, it's going to
It's
happen
gonna
at some time.
happen.
Yeah. So that's all for this episode of the Existential Stoic podcast. If you did enjoy it, do us a favor, give us a good review on Apple Podcasts. It helps out so much. It's like digital gold for podcasts and the like. You
For
can
these
find us,
things.
you can find us on YouTube, also wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.